Well, happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to this devotion, whether you're watching the video or listening to the podcast. I'm so glad you are here. And will you do me a favor and please share a link to these devotions with someone. Tell others about it. Encourage them to join us in this journey through the Word of God so that we can grow and become more Christ-like. Today we are in the 10th chapter of Numbers. Some of the chapters that we haven't read leading up to chapter 10 are just more instructions and regulations and so on. You can welcome to read that on your own. There's some good stuff in there. But we've jumped ahead to chapter 10, starting at verse 11. The first 10 verses of this chapter describe the making of two silver trumpets that would be used to gather the people. They would blow those different ways at different times for different occasions and so on. But what happens in the rest of chapter 10 is the Hebrew people begin their march away from Mount Sinai. So let's look at it starting at verse 11. Now in the second year, in the second month, on the 20th of the month, which is about 11 months after they arrived at Mount Sinai following the Exodus from Egypt. So they spent about 11 months there. And he says, when on this particular day, the cloud, and remember God's presence was symbolized in the presence of that cloud during the day and the fire at night that was over the tabernacle. The cloud was lifted from over the tabernacle of the testimony. And the sons of Israel set out on their journeys from the wilderness of Sinai. Then the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. So they moved out for the first time according to the commandment of the Lord through Moses. As I said, they've been at Mount Sinai for 11 months. A lot had happened. Moses had been up on the mountain a lot. In fact, 2 times for 40 days received the 10 commandments, twice actually. The law was given. They gathered all the resources needed for the tabernacle and actually constructed the tabernacle, erected it, dedicated it, and so on, dedicated the priest. A lot happens. They had the census taken earlier in the book of Numbers to organize the tribes. Where do they camp around the tabernacle? What order do they march in? Everything was getting ready for this moment when they would leave Sinai and begin their march, their journey to the promised land. And what this chapter tells us is they marched in very specific orders. Very specific orders, going back to Numbers chapter 2 and the census and how they were organized by tribes. There was a certain sequencing of the tribes. They didn't just march willy-nilly. It was all described. In verse 17, we read that then the tabernacle was taken down, and the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari, and who were carrying the tabernacle, set out. So when they begin that journey, these tribes are lined up in a certain order. They take the tabernacle apart, the curtains, the poles, all the furnishings, and these 3 different groups of Levites who were descendants of the 3 sons of Levi, each had duties. We read that's all recorded in the earlier chapters of Numbers. They carried different parts of the tabernacle, including some who carried the Ark of the Covenant. But that was all orchestrated. That was all organized, responsibilities assigned before they ever began marching. They didn't say, would some of y'all go over and tear down the tabernacle? And some of y'all, put all those furnishings in the box. No, that was all organized very meticulously in advance. And when they would arrive at a new location on their journey, and by the way, they did this for 40 years. It wasn't the original intent. They were going to go straight to the promised land. But because of their lack of faith and rebellion at Kadesh Barnea that we'll read about in future days, they ended up being cursed and spending 40 years in the wilderness. So for 40 years, they marched in this order. They set up camp in this particular order. They carried the parts of the tabernacle and the furnishings and the altar and everything in that particular fashion. So it would have been a sight to see, though. I bet there was a lot of excitement this day. I mean, they've had the Exodus experience, the 10 plagues in Egypt. God finally frees them. They march for 3 months to Mount Sinai. They are there for 11 months. And now, finally, we're on our way home. We're going to the promised land. We're going to Canaan. We're going to where our ancestors lived. We're going back to the promised land, to the Holy Land. I can just imagine how excited they were. Would have been a sight to see. So what's my devotion? And I'm curious, what did God say to you when you read this chapter? I wouldn't mind if you in the comments just share with me, a sentence or two. Not a paragraph, not a book. I don't have time to read all that. Not from everybody. But if you want to put down one or two sentences, this is what God showed me, God spoke to me, taught me in this chapter. I'd really enjoy seeing that. My devotion is this: organization and preparation. Organization and preparation need to precede anything important that you do. Come first. Don't willy-nilly it. Some people think everything at church and everything in God's ministry should be spontaneous and emotional in the moment. And there's a place for that. I'm not saying there isn't. And we can organize and plan ourselves into doing nothing. And so planning and 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 planning, paralysis by analysis, and never do anything, that extreme is a horrible mistake. And a lot of people, and a lot of churches make that mistake. Being, fly by the seat of your pants, willy-nilly, emotional, spontaneous, that extreme, that'll get you in some problems as well. But if you can find the wisdom and maturity and the emotion to plan and organize and then execute, man, you got something. You will never come up with a perfect plan. And if a different person was in charge, they might plan it a little bit differently. That's okay. But sooner or later, you got to decide and do something. Just decide and go. But don't do it without doing some planning and some organization. Either extreme is a mistake. Planning and organization, good. Now, one more thing. It's got nothing to do with my devotion, but just a little teaching note. Back in chapter 8, I thought it was interesting. You might find this interesting. Verses 23 to 26, the last 4 verses of Numbers chapter 8 talks about the Levites. And remember, all priests were Levites, but not all Levites were priests, okay? The overwhelming majority of Levites were Levites, not priests, and as such served and helped the priest in the tabernacle and all that. Well, what it says in those verses at the end of chapter 8 in Numbers is that the male Levites, when they became 25 years old, started serving. When they reached 50, they retired. You could say they were in active duty as a Levite, helping the priest and helping with the tabernacle and later the temple for 25 years. Started at age 25, and they retired at age 50. 25 years of service. I just thought that was an interesting tidbit that you might like to know. That's Numbers chapter 8, verses 23, 26. Hey, God bless you, and I'll see you tomorrow, everybody.